My cheating wife thought she'd take half. Then I showed the judge her secret bank account. My wife, in a twist worthy of a novel, decided she deserved half of everything in our divorce. So, I rolled up my sleeves, gathered the evidence of her little escapades, and took it to court. Watching her walk away empty-handed was a sight to behold. My wife, in a twist worthy of a novel, insisted on taking half in the divorce. So, I rolled up my sleeves, unearthed her little secrets in court, and enjoyed the sight of her walking away with nothing but a suitcase. Talk about a plot twist. So here I am, a 32-year-old guy, happily hitched to my wonderful wife Leah, who's 29 and has been putting up with me for 3 whole years now. I'm in the finance game, making a pretty good living, and I've got my fingers in a bunch of different investment pies. My wife dabbles in digital marketing consulting and has her sights set on becoming an influencer, or at least that's the plan until the next cat video distracts her. I always saw the influencer gig as her clever little scheme to drive traffic to her digital marketing business, and believe it or not, it actually put some cash in her pocket. If I had been in charge of her business finances, I surely would have spotted the red flags sooner, like a hawk eyeing a particularly suspicious mouse. All I really knew about her income was whatever she decided to share with me, which, let's be honest, could have been anything from a fortune to just enough to keep her cat in gourmet kibble. With no reason to question her intentions, I took on the bulk of the bills and living expenses, while she tossed a few coins into our joint account and worked on her brand like a true artist in the making. She's always been glued to her phone like it's a long-lost friend. Her entire business lives in the digital realm, so even while she's tapping away on her laptop, her phone is right there, ready to buzz with messages and ring with calls, like a loyal sidekick in her entrepreneurial adventure. I got that it was just part of the job, but we had agreed from the get-go that phones were off-limits during our quality time. No texting, no scrolling, just us and our delightful banner. So, that meant we were going old school, no phones allowed while we chatted, enjoyed movies, or went on our little adventures together. It may sound a tad over the top, but it did the trick for us by keeping her phone time in check, at least until she decided the rule was more of a suggestion. That was the first time I had that nagging sense that something just wasn't quite right. She'd grab her phone to shoot off a quick message while we were trying to enjoy a movie or savoring dinner. I'd toss out a comment, and she'd just chuckle, brushing it aside like it was the most pressing matter in the universe. She'd chuckle and say, "Come on, one little message can't be that much of a crime, can it?" And I'd chuckle as well, because it certainly wasn't. But then one message turned into 2, and before I knew it, she was glued to her phone while we were meant to be enjoying each other's company. Every time I tried to bring up her phone obsession, it was like tossing a grenade into a calm pond. Suddenly, she was all splashes and defenses. There was this one time we got into a bit of a spat because she was convinced that the rule had always been utterly ridiculous. I couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all, having to create a rule just because she couldn't seem to part ways with her phone. Classic, right? It often seemed like we were in a love triangle, just me, her, and that ever-present third wheel, her phone. Who would have thought I was just a hop, skip, and a jump away from the truth with that one? Ultimately, I stumbled upon the truth while rummaging through her phone, but let me tell you, it wasn't exactly the plot twist you'd anticipate. I had this grand scheme brewing in my mind, a surprise trip to Italy, the place she'd always dreamed of visiting. You know, the kind of plan that makes you feel like a secret agent, but with less espionage and more pasta. She was always off gallivanting at meetings and lunches with clients, so I had to carve out a little window of time when her calendar was blissfully empty. While she was busy getting all squeaky clean in the shower, I decided to play detective and sneak a peek at her phone calendar, knowing full well she had every appointment logged in there. What could possibly go wrong, right? My knack for spotting details was like having a sixth sense. Discrepancies practically waved at me from across the room. The dates in her calendar seemed to be playing a game of hide-and-seek with the meetings she had actually attended lately. Apparently, she had a chat lined up with a health food startup about a marketing campaign just the day before. Well, that certainly didn't make it onto her calendar, did it? It was clear she had a love affair with her calendar, as trusting her own memory was like trusting a cat to fetch the newspaper, an exercise in futility. She definitely would have noted something as crucial as this, no way she'd let it slip by unnoticed. I attempted to convince myself it was just a fluke, a rare occurrence, like finding a unicorn in your backyard. But wait, there's more to the story. It seems that the dinner from 2 days ago decided to play hide-and-seek with the list. Sneaky little meal. A delightful lunch from last week. A delightful dinner from last Friday. I recalled this little nugget of information because she had to bail on our date, which was a real bummer. I was completely at a loss, scratching my head like a confused chicken trying to solve a crossword puzzle. Well, it was either a classic case of selective memory or she was pulling a fast one about her whereabouts. The first option felt like it was pulled from a hat at a carnival, just a bit too random for my taste. It must have been the second one. Well, I figured it was high time to track down her whereabouts. I dove right into her messages from that point. There was quite the mountain of stuff to sift through. Her phone buzzed with a flurry of recent messages, mostly from clients and various business connections, like a social butterfly flitting from one networking event to another. I didn't have the time to dive deep into every single one, so I just breezed through the first couple of messages from each. You know, just a quick hop, skip, and a jump. It wasn't long before I stumbled upon her sweetly typing away romantic messages to a contact cleverly disguised as a bakery. Who knew love could rise like dough? To cut to the chase, she's been juggling a little something on the side for quite some time now. The client appointments were all neatly arranged with the dates of their meetups, which typically took place at his cozy abode or the occasional hotel room. There I was, deep in the digital rabbit hole of her phone, when she waltzed in like it was just another Tuesday. She came to a complete standstill the moment our eyes met, and for a heartbeat, silence hung between us like an awkward guest at a party. She inquired about my little escapade with her phone, but I decided to play the role of a master of evasion and let her question float away unanswered. I inquired about her meeting with the health food startup, curious to hear how it all unfolded. She put on her best nonchalant face and declared that everything was just peachy. Now that I had the truth in my back pocket, her nerves were as clear as day. When I inquired about the bakery, I could see that she was fully aware of what was going on. We stood there, locked in a quiet stare, until she finally broke the silence. She confessed that happiness had been a stranger in our relationship for quite some time, and the affair was just her way of throwing a little tantrum. Words failed me completely. It was difficult to wrap my head around the fact that she was pinning her affair on her unhappiness. I mean, really? That's like saying the dog ate my homework when you just forgot to do it. I inquired why she hadn't brought it up with me, and she replied that I'd been a bit aloof lately. I could tell that it was a tall tale, considering I was the one bending over backward to keep the lines of communication open. I mentioned to her that I was well aware it was merely a convenient excuse. She was doing her best to pin the blame on me, all because she couldn't bear to own up to her own missteps. We had a colossal showdown, and it hit me like a ton of bricks that our relationship was probably about as salvageable as a shipwreck in a desert. Well, that was that. We were officially done. For one thing, cheating is a big no-no in my book. Once a cheater, always a cheater, right? It's like a bad sequel that nobody asked for, yet here we are, stuck in the plot twist of life. And even if there was a tiny part of me that thought about her coming back, she spent the entire night playing the blame game like it was an Olympic sport, trying to pin all her antics on me. She had no regrets about her actions, not even a smidge. As the clock ticked towards midnight, I found myself saying, "You know what? I think it's time we part ways." She chuckled and remarked that she was certain I'd opt for the path of least resistance rather than putting up a fight for us. I declared I wasn't foolish enough to throw punches for someone who was willing to hand herself over to another guy like a clearance sale item. That's when she quipped, "Just wait until the divorce you're itching for rolls around. I'll show you just how cheap I can be when I take half of your stuff." I chose to keep my mouth shut, but that little nugget of information stuck in my brain like gum on a shoe. That was the moment when it hit me like a ton of bricks. My new reality had arrived, and it wasn't even knocking politely at the door. That very morning, I was hatching a plan for a surprise trip to Italy with her, dreaming of pasta and gelato while trying not to spill my coffee. In less than a day, we found ourselves in a full-blown shouting match that could have rivaled a soap opera. It seemed my life was destined to be a never-ending series of lawyers and courtrooms, like a bad sitcom that just wouldn't get cancelled. For the first time ever, I'm hit with a wave of dread that feels as real as my morning coffee, but deep down, I know there's no turning back now. I attempted to usher her out of the house, but she stood her ground like a stubborn houseplant refusing to be repotted. So, when I casually mentioned she'd be the one crashing in the guest room, let's just say it sparked yet another delightful round of our ongoing debate. I stood my ground, and just like that, she packed her bags and vacated the bedroom. Oh, there was absolutely no chance I was going to hand over the room to her, especially when she was the one who stirred up all this trouble in the first place. She's still hanging out in the house, as if the whole thing was just a minor plot twist in a novel nobody's reading. Sure, we still crash in our own rooms like two ships passing in the night, and the warmth? Well, that's as absent as my motivation to do laundry. But bless her heart, she still makes an effort to chat whenever I wander into her orbit at home. I made it a point to keep my conversations with her to a minimum, only engaging when absolutely necessary. I had no intention of playing nice with the person who decided to pull a fast one on me. Besides, I was pretty convinced she had already called in the legal eagles, just like I had done. I was in the process of filing for divorce, and I made it abundantly clear to her. As she glanced at the divorce papers, a grin spread across her face, and she turned to me with a twinkle in her eye, asking if I thought I had come out on top. She casually mentioned that she intended to stroll out with half of everything, as if it were just another item on her to-do list. She went ahead and made a whole list of what she wanted to pack. My stash of cash, my retirement fund, my collection of stocks, and yes, even my prized whiskey bottles from yesteryear. It stung a bit to come to terms with the fact that she might not have ever truly loved me. She gave me a good ol' stab in the back, and now she's looking to pick my bones clean like a vulture at a buffet. This woman was like a vulture, circling around with an eye for opportunity. I figured the best way to handle it was to keep my cool and not let her see me squirm. No need to hand her that little victory, right? I simply strolled off, leaving the scene like a character in a novel who knows when it's time to exit stage left. Honestly, the thought of losing half of everything has me feeling like I'm on a roller coaster that just won't stop spinning. I put in the sweat and tears for everything I've got, so the thought of someone pulling a fast one on me and waltzing off with it all? Well, that's just a bit much to swallow, isn't it? Well, let's just say my current situation isn't exactly a walk in the park. I'm keeping up this whole stoic facade because the last thing I want is for her to think she's got me all riled up, but honestly, I'm a bit concerned. I'm standing here, peering into the crystal ball of my future, and honestly, it's a bit foggy. There's this nagging fear that the system will once again play favorites, siding with her like it's some kind of twisted game show. Spoiler alert, I'm not feeling lucky. I suppose I should jot this down to lighten the load a bit and maybe find out if anyone has a clue on how I can keep myself safe. It's a real head-scratcher how she's just going about her day as if nothing ever went down. I totally understand where you're coming from. Why pretend everything's peachy when you're grappling with a betrayal that feels like a slap in the face? It's obvious she's aiming to snag as much as possible, and honestly, it's a bit maddening. You can't help but feel that the whole thing has shifted from your relationship to a game of who can grab the most goodies. It's all about the cash and what she can snag before the dust finally settles. Looks like she's got her sights set on your wallet, buddy. Let's make sure that doesn't become a reality. You really put in the effort for everything, didn't you? Here's the latest scoop. Well, it's about time I popped back in to fill you in on how the grand saga wrapped up. Looking back at my first post feels like opening a time capsule filled with not-so-great memories. It's like a trip down memory lane, but instead of scenic views, I hit a few potholes along the way. I'm happy to report that I'm on the upswing now, though it was a bit of a bumpy ride for a spell. The divorce was a real doozy, filled with enough awkwardness to make a penguin in a tuxedo feel out of place. Living under the same roof as someone you're divorcing is about as pleasant as sharing a tent with a porcupine, uncomfortable and prickly, but hey, what choice do you have? There I was, firmly planted in my cozy abode, and she was just as stubborn, refusing to step foot outside. It was a classic standoff, just without the dramatic music. I considered swapping out the locks while she was out, but my lawyer gave me the old "let's not make things worse" speech. She still had her legal claim to the house, and locking her out would just add another layer of chaos to the divorce proceedings, like trying to juggle flaming torches while riding a unicycle. Then, just like that, everything took a turn when I spotted yet another little hiccup. She let slip a savings account I had no idea existed. Surprise, surprise. It wasn't exactly pocket change, either. It wasn't exactly a mountain of cash, but it was certainly enough to make a dent in the wallet. Considering her income, it seems like she's been stashing away pennies like a squirrel preparing for winter. I was taken aback that I was in the dark about it. I had a burning question for her, but deep down, I realized that diving into the topic was like trying to swim with a brick tied to my ankle, definitely not a good idea. Well, for starters, chatting with her was still off the table for me. But, on a more pressing note, my lawyer would definitely want to be in the loop before I did anything else. I picked up the phone, made the trek to his office, and had a good old-fashioned face-to-face chat with him. When I mentioned it to him, he shrugged and said it wasn't exactly a rare occurrence. Every now and then, women would stash away a little cash in a secret bank account, particularly if they were plotting their grand escape. That made sense, sure, but there was still a little gremlin gnawing at my thoughts. Out of nowhere, it dawned on me. I mentioned to him that I've been the one handling her taxes all along, and honestly, I had no clue about that money. It was like discovering a hidden stash of cookies in the pantry, surprising and slightly suspicious. It turns out she had been playing a little game of financial hide-and-seek with me, which also meant her taxes were getting the same treatment. To put it simply, she had been playing a little fast and loose with the money. Let's just say her accounting skills were more fiction than fact. My lawyer straightened up and asked me if I was completely certain about this whole thing. I confidently informed him that I was quite sure about it. The funds in that savings account seemed to be playing a game of hide-and-seek with the income she told me about. She must have been raking in more dough than I was willing to admit. He mentioned he had to really get his hands dirty with this one. If she had truly dabbled in tax fraud, then securing a sweeter deal was absolutely essential. He also let me know that this would stir up a whole pot of trouble that reached far beyond just the divorce. It wouldn't just wipe the floor with her in the divorce. She was definitely in for a bit of a legal pickle. He casually inquired if I was okay with that, adding that he'd totally get it if I felt the need to play the protective card for her. I made it clear to him that my sympathy for her was about as non-existent as a unicorn at a dog park. I had my hopes up for this one. Well, it looks like we're headed to court, but before we don our fancy shoes and legal hats, we really need to give the IRS a little nudge about her. You know, just to keep things interesting. My lawyer was adamant that we needed to spell it out. I was completely in the dark about her little escapades. I had to clear my name, particularly since I was the one doing all the paperwork for her. He mentioned that the chances of me being held responsible were slim, but she might just attempt to take me along for the ride into her mess. When I finally stumbled through the door that day, I felt a spark of happiness flicker to life for the first time since the whole affair fiasco had come crashing down on me. A flicker of hope appeared, just enough to slice through the daily grind of cohabiting with her in that dreary spot. So, she was planning to give me a thorough cleaning, huh? Well, may the odds be ever in your favor with that one. She and her lawyer had truly taken a swing at my jugular. She wanted half of it all, right down to my piggy bank and every last penny I had tucked away in investments. She had her sights set on the house and a nice, plump alimony check to boot. And believe it or not, she actually requested half of my whiskey collection. But her hopes of snagging any of that went up in a puff of smoke the moment we uncovered her little scheme. What a splendid day it turned out to be for yours truly. Her ever-present smug smirk vanished faster than a magician's rabbit when my lawyer laid out our findings. He spilled the beans, leaving no stone unturned. The hidden cash, the mysterious bank account, the puzzling discrepancies on her tax returns. He called in a forensic accountant, hoping to uncover some sneaky business lurking in the shadows. Well, it seems she had a bit of a messy streak going on. She had a knack for leaving breadcrumbs that led straight to the accounts where she stashed her cash. She hadn't even let on about the PayPal account she used to collect most of her payments. She insisted it was just a simple mix-up, but the evidence was waving a big red flag, shouting, "Deception alert." Then she pulled a fast one, trying to pin the blame on me, claiming I was the mastermind behind her tax filing. Well, I went ahead and testified that I filed everything based on the info I was given. You know, just following the breadcrumbs like a good little detective. And just like that, her story reached its final chapter. It's hard to muster up any sympathy for her, especially after it was revealed that she was not only asking for a hefty payout but also spinning a tall tale about her own money situation. The judge really hit the nail on the head. She had moved on from being a partner looking for her slice of the pie. She was a con artist, weaving her web to exploit the system and everyone unfortunate enough to cross her path. My lawyer was all for splitting the assets unevenly, claiming she'd been up to no good. Well, would you look at that? It actually worked. From that moment on, the court seemed to have my back on just about everything. She missed the boat on snagging my savings and investments. She walked away with neither a slice of the house nor a penny in alimony. She didn't even manage to snag the whiskey. She strolled off with the stuff that was clearly hers and the bits I couldn't be bothered to argue over. In the end, she walked away with her wardrobe, her bling, and all the fancy gadgets she relied on to create her videos. The cherry on top of this whole saga is that she ended up with absolutely nothing in her pockets by the time it was all said and done. All of her accounts were frozen, like a popsicle on a winter day. Even the PayPal account she relied on to collect payments from her clients. Turns out, she wasn't just spinning a tall tale after all. She pulled off a financial heist that would make even the most seasoned con artist raise an eyebrow. The IRS decided to take a closer look at her activities. As my lawyer put it, she really made an effort to drag me down with her. She informed him that I was the mastermind behind her taxes and that she was completely in the dark about my antics. They had a chat with me a couple of times. A lawyer who had been through the ringer of divorce sent me a tax attorney, and let me tell you, He was like my shadow during every interrogation. You'd think he was auditioning for a role in a courtroom drama. He promised me I was off the hook for anything and that I'd be as safe as a cat in a sunbeam. He mentioned that their questions were mainly about due diligence, and they were just looking to chat with me to strengthen their case against her. Well, I might not have the inside scoop on her investigation. Apparently, I'm not part of the elite circle of information, but I can tell you one thing, it's definitely serious business. She's been huddling with tax attorneys, having a mini meltdown over back taxes and the looming specter of criminal charges. Well, she's certainly dialed my number a few times since that little episode. She didn't exactly fall to her knees and plead for me to come back or anything like that. She let out a scream that could wake the neighbors, blaming me for turning her life into a soap opera. I have a sneaking suspicion she might have been a bit tipsy on a few of those occasions. She attempted to pin the blame for her life unraveling on me, and I simply replied that she was the one who had made her bed. Well, between her sneaky tax maneuvers and her little escapades behind my back, it's safe to say she had a knack for making questionable choices, none of which I had a hand in, mind you. The last time she rang me up, she had the audacity to throw a little threat my way. I playfully suggested that I might have to call the cops and wondered if she was keen on adding a few more charges to her collection. She hung up the phone and has been as silent as a library ever since. Fear? Nah, that's just a word in the dictionary for me. Well, I might just be spouting off some tipsy ramblings, but I figured it was best to give my lawyer and the local police a heads up, just in case the universe decides to throw a curveball my way. Well, I've packed my bags and hit the road of life since that little detour. Well, since she's no longer a legal resident of the house, I must admit, it brought me a certain joy to see her shown the door. Not long after, I packed my bags and made my grand exit from the house all on my own. Let's just say that place is like a bad sequel to a movie I never wanted to see in the first place. Well, the house is still sitting there, untouched and waiting for my grand plans to kick in. It's like a blank canvas, just begging for a splash of color, or at least a good dusting. I'm caught in a bit of a pickle, trying to figure out if selling it or renting it is the smarter financial play for me at this moment. Feeling a bit restless, I decided it was high time to embark on that trip I'd been daydreaming about. Italy really knows how to put on a show this time of year. I thought I was ready to turn the page, but it turns out I just couldn't resist one final little mischief. I sent her a snapshot of me savoring a bottle of that fancy whiskey while lounging on a stunning beach in Tuscany. Well, let's just say she let me have it after that little episode. But you know what? It was totally worth it because I managed to get under her skin, and honestly, that was my goal all along. Honestly, I'm just relieved to have emerged from this whole saga unscathed, and I'm even more thrilled to be free from her drama for good. It's quite a scene, isn't it? She really went for the gold, trying to pull you into her tax drama and pointing fingers like it was an Olympic sport. Talk about a plot twist. That tiny picture probably sent her spiraling into a complete meltdown, didn't it? Honestly, there are times when that little bit of petty satisfaction is exactly the pick-me-up we need after all we've been through. Happy to hear you've found some tranquility, and it looks like you're really making strides forward now. When it comes to the house, no rush. It seems like you're in a pretty good place to make a solid choice. Just take your time and let the ideas simmer a bit. Have you ever stumbled upon someone trying to keep a colossal secret from you? So, what was your game plan for dealing with that situation? Thanks for hopping on board with us today in our room. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss our next video. It's going to be a blast. Catch you later.